You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hello again, People Centric leaders. We are back with another episode of the People Centric Podcast, which is, maybe this is a good time to say it. We have a lot of people who are big fans, big fans, quite the following of the People Centric Podcast. Maybe I'm overselling it. I don't know, but we hear from you a lot that you love this. So feel free to share the People Centric Podcast. And it's never fails whenever we talk about this. They say, well, I would love to listen to the People Centric Podcast. What's it called? It's called the People Centric Podcast, which is pretty self-explanatory. We're back with another episode.
I've never been asked that. I've never been asked like, oh, you have a podcast? Yeah. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. We get asked, of course, Don and I are out and, we're out with the people. We're out with the people. You're kind of not a hermit. That's the wrong word. You're just not as public, I guess. And we go and they say wow, you have a podcast. We'd love to listen to a podcast. What's it called? It's called the People Centric Podcast. And you can find it really anywhere. Don likes to say it's on Apple. Ever heard of it? But it's really kind of easy to have a podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get it. So the People Centric Podcast. Now, we're excited to bring this episode to you. And it's funny that I said we're excited because it's all about the word no. It's all about saying no to things. And I don't know, maybe this is Matt Griswold with People Centric. If you're just hearing my voice, wondering who this is, I'm only going to speak for myself for just a second here, and then we'll introduce the rest of the team. Where this comes into play, I have what you would refer to as a gaggle of kids. It's a flock. It's a herd. There are several kids. And a lot of times I win the room. I have five kids. And I like to joke with people and say, yep, 5 on purpose kids. My wife and I knew exactly what was happening. And we just wanted a big family. We love kids. We love our kids, all of them, most of the time. Right. And if you're a parent of children, I wonder if you have ever said this, where your child asks for something and you say the answer is no. And they say, for instance, I don't understand that. Why is the answer no? Or how come? They'll come back with that sometimes. And the parent answer in most cases is because I said so. Now this is where we also kind of trickle management and parenting, kind of it's managing people and parenting kids is a lot. They're very similar. And sometimes you might be listening to this as a manager going, yeah, I say that at work all the time. The answer is no. Why? Because I said so. And what this podcast is specifically going to talk about is maybe one, that's not the best response. And two, if I'm somebody that was told no, how do I cope with the answer of no? How do I respond to that, maybe in the workplace, in a healthy way? Not in a throw the copy machine kind of a way, but in a healthy way. And we're going to talk about that today. I am joined by a few different people here. There's 4 of us. You guys get 4 of us on the podcast today. And I'll just go in the order of my screen anyway. I'll go and we'll introduce each of you one by one here. Let's start with Diana Royalty, our COO co-founder here. Now, Diana, just transparently for the people, the idea for this topic was yours. And I think it's because, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you enjoy telling us no most of the time, or at least myself. Is that right or no?
Listen, this was your idea. Sort of.
No.
Kind of. Yes, it was. It was because
it stemmed from an idea that you had, Matt.
Yeah. But when you spurred the thought in me, I was like, oh yeah, I love telling Matt no. Yeah. Actually, let me be clear. I don't love telling you no. I hate it because you're always like, why? And then you whine about it and then you don't drop it for 50 years. So I can't tell you no. You wear me down. It's the worst. It's
Yeah.
the worst.
I had a positive spin on the take for this on emotional intelligence and how to cope. And Diana, the only thing that she took from it was, I like where we're going. Let's talk about how to deal with the answer no. And so I don't know. I'm interested for the after meeting that's going to follow this because I feel like she needs to tell us something. Thank you, Diana. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on this. Let's go to Bethany Taff. We have Bethany Taff, our engagement manager, on the phone here. You have kids, right? Is it easy or hard to go to the no, and how do they cope with it?
Yeah, we say no a lot, which kind of stinks. Have you guys seen the movie Yes Day?
Oh, it's a horrible idea. Don't do
It's
it.
a horrible, it's a funny movie. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix, I think. It's a funny movie. My kids love it. So now they always ask me, can we have a yes day? And guess what my answer is? Nope.
No.
I was
No.
like, maybe, but I guess they did create rules for it, but they were still probably not as many rules.
Yes day, and you were like no to a yes day. Like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No to a yes day. What's a yes day? You have to say yes to everything. The answer's no. The answer's no immediately.
But they did
that.
in the movie, they do have some guidelines for it. Probably not as many as they should have. So if we ever did a yes day, we'd probably still have to create more rules.
And this is another good example, Bethany. I'm glad you brought that up. This is another good example of how sometimes parenting bleeds into management. If you're a manager, I think that might even be a horrible idea for a yes day for your team, too. I don't know. I mean, what are they gonna? I don't know. Maybe be strict with the guidelines on that, is what I'm saying. Diana, you were gonna add to that?
We had a yes day for this team. I can only imagine the amount of money we would spend.
Yeah, we should all make a list. We should make a wish list right now.
Billions of dollars, Wagyu steaks for all, and I just
go big on our meal. We love our food around here.
It would be amazing. Don't lie. It would be the best of yes days, and then we would but it would be amazing.
That voice you hear there is Philip Herzog. Philip Herzog, engagement specialist, People Centric. Philip, I mean, you've already introduced yourself to the people there, but are you pro no or con no? Like, are we for no's
or con yes?
Yeah,
That's
right.
Yes. Yeah. I love how Bethany's like, no children, your request for a yes day is going to be met with a very short no moment and it kills a day, right? Like, I think that's why no is so painful because you imagine a whole day and it takes 2 seconds for the dreams to be crushed. I am eternally positive most of the time. So typically when I have a no, I hear that and it turns into a not yet, right? So that is, we were also talking about Gen Z, which again, I'm on the borderline of Gen Z. I behave as a millennial boomer. I'm a mix of things. But for no, most often when I hear no, I'm always like, not yet, right? Like we'll come back to this. I will come back. I will win. So I think it's a fun topic because, yeah, I have had personal no's before that just kind of kill, right? They're kind of just bummers. And so I think how you deal with that, especially that boss to employee piece, because I think we deal with a lot of managers who are like, what? Do they want me to tell them everything? I can't, and I don't want to, and they don't want me to. So how do you do that? Anyway, I'm excited to chat with you guys about this too.
That is awesome. This is who we have on the podcast right now. And this is, I venture to say, I don't know, we might have differing opinions through this, which is also positive. That's good. That's a good thing as far as the podcast is concerned. Let me ask this question to start us off here. Now that we understand what the topic is, the coping with the no, and there's two different schools of thought to this, but maybe how has, I'm going to try to say this, and if I have to reframe it, it's okay, but how has coping with no changed in the workplace over the last 20 years?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of us weren't in the workforce 20 years ago. We're not that old.
Good.
But
right. Jeez.
But I was.
What you heard though? What have you heard about the workplace in 20 years?
I am old enough. I'll put it out there. I don't look old enough, but I am.
Right.
So I'll say that when I first started, I worked at a Hollywood Video. That was my biggest retail job, and I freaking loved it. It was the best job ever. Anyway, those are now defunct, but they were great back in the day.
Nothing to do with you. Nothing.
No, right. I rocked it. I'll tell you all the Hollywood Video stories. But anyway, so back in the day when you were asked to do something, or you asked to do something, there was no like discussion around it, right? It was just sort of like, your boss told you to do it, you're going to go do it. There were many times that I was like, no, it would make more sense if we did this first and then this and then this, because it all, I'm a process person and like operations is my deal. And there were many times I said that, and the boss would just be like, no, just go do it how I told you to do it. Right. Like, okay, I still feel like I was right, but he told me to do it away, and he didn't want to have to explain himself, and he didn't want some kid in high school telling him how to do his job or how to do it better. So he just like flatly denied and was like, no, just go do it the way I told you to do it and come back when you're done. And I think retail experiences are different than like office experiences and all that stuff. And probably me being, I think I was 15 at the time, probably lend to him just being like, please don't tell me how to do this better. Just shut up and go do your work. And so it's probably not like a all the way thing, but I do think that back in the day, it was much more, just do what I tell you. Like, don't ask a bunch of questions, just go do it. And now I think it's bled more towards, let's have a conversation about it. Let's discuss it. Let's unpack it. Let's ask questions about it. So I don't know. I think it's shifted quite a bit from the authoritarian to the more democratic.
Yeah, and I think it's even interesting that you had thoughts, 20 years ago of how to do it better. I don't mean that negatively.
Very opinionated.
Right. I mean, I guess I could see that part of it. But what I'm saying is, most of the time, I think, especially as young workers, and I'm going to say this now, and this is why I asked the question the way I did. 20 years ago, as a young worker, my first job was like in a grocery store, and I remember entering the workforce. They're like, "Hey, you need to go do that." I'm like, "All right," and I go do that. Hey, go get the carts out of the parking lot. Okay, right, and it was very much of a sit and wait. What do you want me to do?
Yeah,
You're the boss, right?
I'm the boss now, and you, the speaker.
Yeah, this is why lots of people like me. I'm very agreeable. Go do that. All right. What else do you want?
Figured it out.
Yeah. The relationship building part of it. It's funny. I couldn't imagine myself at that time going, I hear you. I hear you asking me to do that. I have thoughts though on how I'd rather maybe not do that or do that this way. And I could never imagine that being a conversation then. Now that's very much a conversation now that you kind of morph into that. But if we're asking the difference maybe in what that looks like 20 years ago versus now, I think people are entering, like we talked about this earlier with the Gen Z entering the workforce right now. Philip, you said you're a borderline Gen Z. You've been in the workforce for about 3 years now, right? I don't know. What?
I've actually been in the workforce 14 years.
Wow. Okay.
Child labor in the Herzog household.
Yeah, but why do you think that mentality has changed? And I don't want to put Philip on the spot, but why do you think the mentality has changed? We were talking about the Gen Z. There are some of the fun facts about the Gen Zs is if they don't necessarily like something, or if the answer is no, they might be more apt to, instead of saying, oh, okay, just thought I'd ask, right? Instead of saying that, they'd be like, oh, well, forget it. I'm going to go somewhere where the answer is yes. Why? What's created that change? Where do you think that's come from?
Yeah, I know we were talking about this earlier. I think some of it is people really, I think in our generation, the millennial generation, I think you want to be known and valued in the workplace too. And so I don't think no is just, I'm an authority figure and there's a reason that no is an answer. I think no comes across as, if it's done a certain way, like you don't really matter and I don't need you. So settle down, simmer down. Let someone else take care of this, right? Yeah. And you're like, whoa, well, my ideas matter. My voice, I matter. And so that combined with the idea, there's, I think, many more options, whether it's the internet, just the amount of people who are leaving the workforce. There's a lot of gaps, right? We need more human beings. We don't have them. So I think you can have more options. So if you don't like somewhere, then you'll leave. So I think that's partly why, to answer your question, why it's changed over the last 20 years too. I think employers know we need to keep people around, so we probably should respond differently. to their yes or to their no. I will say, my sister and some friends even younger, just at the end of high school or just starting college, they'll talk about how they turn their school schedules into their bosses. They don't even have a conversation. They're just saying, this is my school schedule. And their employer's just supposed to know, don't ever schedule me around that, right? Like,
Right.
conversation.
Here's all the
Which-
things you need to work around to
Right.
accommodate.
So interesting. And I hear them talk about that, and you're like, what? Yeah. So that is a difference too, right? To that level of like, there's not even a yes or no there. It's like just I'm telling you no. It's like an upward no. And so I think there's several pieces to it, but the short answer would be they just have more options and they want to be valued and heard. So I think in a job for if you are a no giver, to then how you give your no really, really matters.
Yeah.
And I think the nature of work has shifted a lot, right? When I first was in the workforce, there wasn't Teams and Slack and Facebook and text messaging didn't really exist back then.
Wow.
So yeah. So it was sort of like
Yeah.
you had a lot of space to be off. And I think that has shifted a lot. There's a lot more like intermingling of work and life. And so millennials and Gen Zers are kind of setting more boundaries around work because we kind of have to. And so I think us saying no has lent itself to just more no's being out there, right? Like we're going to say no to things that intrude on our boundaries or intrude in our life circumstances. And so I think there's just more no's around in general.
One of the things, Diana, as we were framing this together, we were talking about, okay, so what perspective, what are our perspectives here? What stance do we maybe want to try to take individually here? But you talked about, this is a workforce too, the younger generation, and we can bounce off of this, but I wanted to tag this before I get off of it. This Gen Z is they came into the workplace during this COVID, right? During the pandemic, they were coming into the workplace at that time. Whenever change was a thing, right? And it wasn't necessarily they were quitting the employer. A lot of times, and through maybe no fault of the organizations, the employers were quitting them at the time too, right? Which didn't used to necessarily be a thing either. You could find a place and you could stay there and you could build roots and build relationships, and they came into the workplace at this funky place of we say no, they just bounce around. Well, some of that might be because they tried, their first experience of it didn't last very long, and the employer had to make a decision and said, you're gone. We gotta move in a different direction. And so that maybe became just a norm for them right off the bat too. So
yeah, they kind of were brought up in this era of change is inevitable and everything is figure outable, right? Because it's just so tumultuous. And so they did that. They figured it out. They were like, okay, change is going to happen. And if I don't like it, I can go somewhere else, or they can find someone else to do the job,
Yeah. I like that too. And we'll talk more about that later. We've already talked about, this is probably a good topic for a future podcast all on its own. So we'll dwell on that. Philip, you said something that's interesting. And Bethany, I definitely want to involve you in the conversation here too. But you said something that was, with the managers of, shoot, I just lost my entire train of thought. Hang on a second. Dang it. We never have to edit this. Rianne, this is your edit spot. You said something though that was interesting. Okay. Are you ready?
Oh,
And
I'm ready.
back
I'm
in
ready.
3, 2, 1. Philip, you said something that was really interesting earlier when you were talking about this is why it's important to frame the no carefully so we don't, lose the workforce that we have already. And what I want to pause just short of that, and we can get into that, but I want to pause just short of that because I can already hear the leadership management directors, and they're going, "What in the world is that? Am I not allowed to say no at all? Like, am I always on eggshells then, or what happened? Can I just not lead and manage my people? Do I have to be worried about the repercussions that my people might give me all the time?" And I don't know. I just think that's an interesting take there. Like, what would we say to that group of people right now that's listening going, I have to still be capable of saying no sometimes, right? I've got to be able to say no, and dang it, you got to trust me sometimes too, that I can't say the things that you're asking me to say, right? Where's that line? Or maybe how do we coach that?
That's great. I would say what I say to all of the people I coach, be very afraid Be afraid of your employees. They are
Yeah.
terrifying. They're like velociraptors. So be
Right.
prepared. Have a slab of meat, throw it at them, say no and run. Just run quick. Give them
At
the
our place, I won't say who it is, but we refer to her as Lyanna. And we have to be very careful about just stepping on those toes.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've personally had a no from Lyanna, actually, thinking about it. I was like, maybe I need to ask more questions or
Wow.
apparently, but
That is surprising. And
don't
I
think
really stand
Yeah.
behind Anna so much, but
Lyanna.
You should walk a day in my shoes, people. Oh.
No, what? There's no so we do not tell people to be afraid, and it is good to have that trust, right? I think some of it comes down to the reason we say we're people centric, is putting people at the center. So even if there is a no, like if people ask, there's a reason for that. So I would say your answers should just honor the person. So it doesn't mean you pull out a 35-point plan. And so I think you also as a leader should have your own boundaries, and everyone doesn't need to know everything. But I think even a thank you with the no, like depending on the situation, right? But like, hey, thank you for bringing this to the attention. And there's this other thing that's going on, or blah, blah, blah. Like enough of an example that it does give some information. I think if someone pushes really hard after that, right? And they're like, well, I just don't accept this. And we had a group recently where something like this happened. They were like, I do not accept this. And this other department, they're no, and there's all these problems and all these things are going on. And they were really worked up about it. We just leaned in a little bit more and we said, hey, is there something else going on? Like, are you okay? And really her major frustration wasn't actually about her question. It was about a relationship she had with an entire department. And so I think that's the other thing. If someone really responds really, really badly to your no, it's probably not just about that question they had or that thing you're talking about. There's something else going on. So that would be my advice for someone who gets a strong response of a no and who's afraid of just doing that. So honor the person in your response is what I would say.
that's good. I like that answer. I think that there's usually more. And if it's like framing the no, that was part of your question, right, Matt? Framing the no. So
Yeah, framing the no and really the ability. Yes, I hope managers hear that we're saying yes. You can still say no, but
Yeah.
I think you said it well. With maybe it needs to be framed well. What's
Yeah.
framing mean?
I really like that. Yeah, that thinking through how do you just frame the no. And that doesn't mean to like sugarcoat the no. Because I think there's a difference. We've had that. I think a lot of us have had that experience too, where somebody like they put a lot of like, yeah, just a lot of extra like garnishes around the word no. That was like, well, that was still wasn't it still wasn't great. But it's more of just like explaining or asking the question to find out more about like what is the intention behind this maybe request, or like what are you hoping to get when you're working with an employee and they come to you with a specific request and you the answer is probably going to be no, but you just need to understand like where is this coming from, why are they asking this, what's really the end goal that we're trying to get to. And like Philip said, like sometimes he sees no's as a not yet, and if there is that opportunity to be able to say, to be able to address that, to say like, is this something that maybe the answer is no right now, but in the future, this is what, it could look a little bit different, and how to talk through that. Or if you do need to address and just say that like, this is a no, and it's probably always going to be a no. And we just have to be really clear about that too. I think that's very much okay.
I think, that reminds me of something that I've heard Don say several times. I'm sure we've said it on the podcast too, but if your employee comes to you as a manager and says, I want a raise, your first response typically is no. Thanks for asking. Go back to work, right? And he always coaches people to say,
Yeah.
man, we're on the same page. We're aligned with that. How do we get you a raise? Like, well, I want to do that too. What are the things that need to happen in order for you to receive that? That's kind of the maybe a better way to deliver that, what that no might look like. I had another thought here too. Diana, you and I were on a phone call the other day, and we were talking with a gentleman from an organization, and they were talking about, man, I think we're doing the right things, but I just want to make sure that we're continuing to set up for success. I want to make sure that we're giving the people the things that they need. And ultimately, our conversation went to setting expectations, strategic planning, goal setting. And it's not just a fallback because we're consultants that say, yeah, you should hire us to do strategic planning, right? We would say that whether it's with us or not, that's your beacon for the direction that we're going. And I think sometimes people have a hard time with accepting no because there wasn't a clear expectation of what it is that we're doing in the first place set, which kind of sounds, now it's just kind of arbitrary. And two, if there's not established strategic planning with the goals, those, Diana, we talked to them about, let's establish 3 to 5 goals. And that way, when people are asking for things, then we can just refer to the plan that we have created. And if it makes sense for the thing that we're asking that fits into the overall goal and objectives, man, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to say yes. And I think for a lot of leadership, they want to say yes. We don't want conflict or friction in the workplace, but without that strategy or without those expectations that are maybe in place, it's hard for us to say yes confidently because I don't have a direction or a vision of where we're going. I don't know, Diane, if you would add anything to that, or if you were, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure you recall the conversation that we had there.
I do. Yeah. And I think it is true that those goals and those strategy and having everyone aligned in the same direction does make it really a lot easier to say no if you have to, because it's a no because there's a reason behind the no.
Yeah.
It's just not a no for no reason, right? And I think it also makes it easier to say yes to stuff too. I think that goes both ways. So I'm a big fan of being able to redirect back to the goal and being like, okay, you want to raise, but we've said we're going to work on this, this, and this, and those things aren't done yet. So how can we get there so that then we can get to where you want to be also,
Yeah,
I think
some of that is trusting our people with a little bit more information than maybe what you've already given them. Because where we see that rear its head is when you'll hear from a manager, and I'm sure all of us on this podcast have gotten a phone call from somebody that says so and so's asking for ridiculous things. So and so keeps saying that they need this, and I'm like, how am I supposed to accommodate that? Right? And then they'll tell us, right? They'll tell us like, because of this and this and this and this, that's why it can't be. The problem is that that employee doesn't know the this and this and this and this. And sometimes you can't say this or that, but you could say this and that, those types of things. And so that transparency in order to be able to help setting expectations too. So we've talked. Okay, go ahead, Philip.
Oh, well, I was saying, the part I love of that too is that you mentioned trust earlier. So if you do that, not only are you building trust by like, this is the reason I'm saying no to you, to Diana's point, I think it expresses how you as an organization, as a leader, say yes and no to other things too. Because if I get no and I see someone else got a yes to their random other question, that's when I start, you know what I mean? I think that's when people start to disengage or have misalignment, or, well, why did they get a yes and why did I? And if you have that same approach each time, it's like, oh, well, it also makes it more predictable and helpful when they come to you. We're like, I know these key objectives matter, so I'm going to bring this and frame this. Is it important? And then even before they ask you, they might think, this actually has nothing to do with the key objectives, right? We're not going to become, the example, a hipster barber shop. That's not what we do. So I won't ask that this time, right? Something like that.
Yeah, no, I love that thought. Bethany, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you going to add to that?
No, not to that specifically. I was just thinking about like the flip side of when you're the one that's receiving the no, and thinking about we were talking about with Gen Z specifically earlier too, but I mean I think it applies anywhere. But I think there's a lot to be said that as a millennial coming up in the workforce who has been in the workforce for 5 years shy of 20 years. So
I like how you frame 5 years shy of 20. All right. Under your breath.
Yeah. So like 15 years, right? So anyways, I think that there's just what I feel like I've learned is that sometimes you, like you said, you don't always know what's behind the no. And there's wisdom that you don't have. And experience that you don't have sometimes. And even though you think there's like you have a really great idea, and it might be a really great idea, but maybe it's already been done before. And, I think that's the hard part of being a leader, having to say no, is that, yeah, maybe this thing has been tried before and it didn't really work. And so being able to say no in those situations can be really difficult. And I also know that when you maybe when you're young, or maybe not, maybe you're just a really ambitious, passionate person in the workforce and think like, I have so many ideas and I want to apply all these ideas, and that's awesome. And so hopefully you can have open conversations about that. But also sometimes it's good to just receive the no and trust that your boss just has some more wisdom that you'll just see down the line. But ideally, like we've said, there's a conversation that can say where the boss can kind of say, this is what I've seen happen before in these situations. You can talk through it a little bit and say, like, this is how it played out. Does that mean that's how it's going to happen every single time? Maybe not, but I just want to share like what my experience has been and what just some wisdom around it. Because I've seen situations like this where I thought, hey, I don't really understand why this thing is a no. But as time passed, I was like, oh, I couldn't have predicted it that way. And they saw a pattern that maybe I just didn't see because I just don't have that experience in that time in that role. So that was what
I have a story about this that will help highlight that. When I was first in the workforce, past retail, my first like grown-up job, I was an office manager for a high functioning nationwide office. And I wanted to change something. And at our like manager meeting, there was like 8 of us. I said, oh, and the admin office wants to change this. We just need your approval, to the owner of the company. And he was like, oh, not approved. We are not going to do it that way. And I was like, oh, why? And he was like, well, because this is how we do it. That was his, this is how we do it. And I said in the meeting, well, how we've been doing it is dumb or stupid. I can't remember if I said dumb or stupid. Either way, he was not pleased at all. And he was like, we'll talk about this later. Right. And I was like, crap, I'm in trouble. But he sure enough did pull me aside later and was like, listen, we do it this way because of this, and this. I just wasn't going to get into that into the middle of our meeting. And I was like, oh, okay. So what I should have done is when I got the no, I should have been like, can we talk about it? Right. Because, or can you tell me what you know so that I can share what I know and maybe we can come up with something different. But instead I was like, well, that's stupid. And I wasn't able to make change for a long time at that organization because he had become resistant to me because I called what he was doing stupid and I didn't have all of the information. Right. So yes. I think when you do get a no, it's important to step back and not say the immediate thing that comes to your head like a dummy, like I did. But know that there are other things behind the no. Like Bethany was saying, there's experience, there's time, there's effort, there's energy, there's things that have happened that they have planned for it. Right. So know that there are things behind the no, and then ask questions about that later, not in the middle of a big meeting.
Yeah, there's an emotional intelligence component to this, right? This emotional intelligence component of understanding, okay, I just received a no. I have a couple of different options of how I can react to this no right now, right? I can, there's an old commercial where they're going around the boardroom and the boss passes around the pamphlets to everybody and everybody's like, yeah, this looks good. And there's one guy in there and he flips it to the middle of the table. He's like, no, this is stupid. This is a dumb plan. And the next thing you see is him with the box outside of the building, right? So I could react like that, like, no, that's dumb. I'm not doing it that way. Or I could kind of internalize that. I think it's a very real thing. I think everybody kind of goes through that process. You just verbalized it where it's like, that's a dumb plan. Maybe that's our thought. And that's where we start. But emotional intelligence says, scan the room, know the audience, know the moment. And is this something that I should say right now? Reality says probably not, right? Emotional intelligence is not only about you, but it's about the social awareness of how this might be received by other people too, and what influence that we talk about influence quite a bit. What influence would that have on the rest of the department too? So, anyway, I think if we can kind of move to wrap this up. We've talked about coping with the no. I think some of the highlights here, and you guys can help me with hitting the highlights and the main takeaways from your perspective. I think as far as I'm concerned, like no is going to happen in the workplace. Like no is going to happen. As adults, I think we're okay with this response of no, as long as I understand maybe a little bit of the why. The answer is no. I think if I am that person in the workplace who's continually bringing things up and it's a no and it's a no and it's a no, then pretty soon I'm going to lose interest. I'm not going to be creative. I'm not going to be innovative. I'm not going to be helpful. I'm going to do one of two things. I'm just going to keep my head down and just look out for myself, or I'm going to leave and walk away in the end, right? But if I have no with a little context of where that no is coming from, whether it's from the strategic plan, whether it's from the setting expectations, whether it's from previous conversations, or whether it's just because I have a general trust that the leadership is leading us in the right way. They've made some positive things. We've seen those things. Then I'm going to be frustrated if I don't have that clarity too. So I think to me, that's one of the main takeaways that I could encourage people with there too. Any other takeaways that you might hit as a highlight here for you all?
I mean, I'll just double down a little bit on what you were saying for the manager of like, be transparent. I know you can't tell people everything, right? Like in that moment, it would have been cool if that boss would have been like, I'm not going to prove it. Let's talk about it later. Like, and engaged me in the conversation. Instead of just a flat out no, that's because we've always done it this way. I think it would have gone over better for me if he would have said no, but I hear you and let's talk about why it's a no. And so I think managers today probably need to give a lot of transparency. And no, you don't have to tell them everything and you don't have to give company secrets away or whatever, but the transparent no and the understanding no is going to get people a lot further and build trust a lot better.
Sometimes we're not as transparent as managers because we feel it's more of a noble cause, right? I'm protecting them by not sharing that information. The reality is, like, your folks want to help you succeed. Like, you can be transparent with them to a point. You don't have to, like Diana said, the company secrets or whatever, but you don't have to protect them. We want to equip them, right? And give them the knowledge to help you make awesome decisions for them. So, Philip, Bethany, thoughts?
Yeah, as you know, it's Diana was talking to. I think it's like helping someone know the no, right? So it's like, do we know why the no is there as opposed to just no? Is it a period? Is it an exclamation mark? So yeah, the final thing I was thinking, a lot of responses to no as well. If you're a manager who also can't receive no, your team will watch that, which is why I love this emotional intelligence piece. Everyone has no, even if you're a CEO. We see so many CEOs and leaders, right, who have heard a no, or the data says no, or the opportunity is no. And so I think receiving no is something that applies to everyone, to your point earlier.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Philip. Bethany.
I think for managers too, if you reframe, you hear us talking a lot about your role as a manager is also as a coach. And so I think if you reframe the way that you think about what your role even is, and that you are knowing yourself as a coach too, is that when you receive that no, or when you have an opportunity where you want to say no, you think about how you need to coach in that moment too. And what is the opportunity there for growth and development, or just like to continue to share information. I think that that's one way to think about it too. And then I would say, like, for the employee that's just receiving the no, is like, don't be so quick to turn around and say, well, then I don't want to work here anymore. Because I think there's an opportunity to recognize that, like, okay, first of all, like, how often are you actually hearing the no's? Second of all, have you even asked the second question to say, you know, could we talk more about why? And what's the response to that? Having that emotional intelligence to know what's the appropriate next question. Sometimes, is it worth it? Is it the time? Is it the place? Kind of a thing. And I think I had another one, but I don't remember it now. So anyways, that's what
I like
would
your
say.
thought. I like your thought on the coach part there too. Like, part of this, and this ties directly into that emotional intelligence piece too, knowing that I'm about to say no to this person, how are they going to take it? And then I got to put my coach hat on and say, I need to get out in front of that and help coach them just a little bit. But even before the conversation, I need to anticipate how I think they're going to react, and then maybe help coach them through that at the same time too. So.
Yeah,
anyway, great thoughts, man. It was good to be with all of you again. You know, we had our company retreat a couple of weeks ago. I got to see everybody's face there, but this is the first time we've been on a podcast all together like this for a while. So good to see you all. And for the listeners out there, we thank you so much for participating with the podcast. Again, it's called the People Centric Podcast. Feel free to share that with your peers, or feel free to share that with your coworkers and things like that too. We love love the diversity of thought that maybe the podcast brings, and feel free to give us ideas for other topics going forward. But until next time, guys, get out there and just be awesome. Love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and be